A coworker who constantly missed deadlines complained. It's not fair that I have to work as hard as everyone else. When I suggested he improve his time management, he smirked and said, Why should I? I'll just let you do it instead. The supervisor walked by, pulled out his evaluation report, and said, Funny, because the only thing you'll be doing is finding a new job. Let me just say, I've worked in this office for 8 years. It's not glamorous. It's not terrible. It's corporate life in a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago, and we all make it through the day with some sarcasm and caffeine. You keep your head down, do the work, don't screw over your team, and usually people leave you alone. That's been my system. I'm not flashy. I'm not political. But people know I'm reliable. That's probably why I became an easy target. This story is about a guy I'll call Elliot, not his real name, who got hired about 1.5 years ago. When he walked in, he had that look, one of those guys who always looks like he's about to pitch you a startup idea that doesn't exist. Fancy clothes, slick hair, Bluetooth headset in one ear like he's on some high-stakes call. Always talking fast, never saying anything. We all figured he was somebody's recommendation. And that was confirmed pretty quick when the VP mentioned in passing that Elliot was family friends with a longtime client. Great. But Elliot didn't even try to hide the fact that he didn't know what he was doing. During training, he'd zone out. I'd see him scrolling on his phone during walkthroughs. He'd nod and pretend to get it, then immediately ping people on Teams asking them to walk him through it all over again. Every time. At first, I thought, okay, new guy, maybe he's overwhelmed. Happens. So I helped. I explained things a few times. Then a few more. Then, suddenly, I was doing the thing for him. One day, he asked me to just polish up his weekly report because he was in meetings. What he sent me was a blank document with a file name. That's it. He literally sent me a Word doc with just the title at the top and said, Can you finish this? You're faster at it anyway. I told him, You know this is your task, right? He said, Why should I waste time on stuff you can do better? I'll just let you do it instead. He smirked when he said it. Like he was being clever. Like this was some genius strategy. That's when it started getting personal. He'd always wait until the last minute, then dump things on me or someone else with some excuse. Client call ran over, forgot I had a dentist appointment, got pulled into something urgent with upper management. Always something. But it wasn't just the workload. It was how he acted. He'd take credit. Loudly. In meetings, he'd interrupt to talk about his approach or his system. One time, I built out an entire pivot table structure to simplify client reports. A few days later, I heard him explaining the process to someone else like it was his original idea. And the cherry on top? He was lazy, but also arrogant. He made fun of other coworkers for trying too hard. He once told a junior analyst that people like me were office sheep who do extra work just to get a pat on the head. Then came the day he said something in front of my face that made me stop everything. We were in a team huddle, going over deadlines. I mentioned that I was juggling 3 client decks and asked if anyone else needed help prioritizing. Elliot, sitting across from me, said loud enough for everyone to hear, It's not fair that I have to work as hard as everyone else. Some of you are just more suited to this kind of stuff. It's easier for you. Janice, our supervisor, paused for a second and said, You mean it's unfair to have the same job expectations as everyone else? Elliot nodded. Yeah. Like OP here is built for this. I'm not. He laughed. I didn't. That night I stayed late and started documenting every file, every email, every time he asked for help or offloaded something onto me or someone else. I made a folder. I logged the project names, timestamps, versions, who the real editor was. I downloaded version histories, screen recorded some edits, saved email threads, and made sure I had everything backed up. Overkill? Maybe. But I knew how these guys played. The kind who look you in the eye while standing on your back. I didn't send anything in. Not yet. I just kept my head down and waited. A couple weeks later, a big client project came in. It was messy. Short timeline. A lot of moving parts. Janice split the work fairly. Elliot got a chunk. I got mine. Elliot immediately messaged me. Hey, can you help with the data part again? You're faster. I'll do the write-up if you can do the structure. I told him no. Sorry, already at capacity. He replied. Damn. Okay. I'll figure something out. He didn't. The client deck he submitted was a disaster. Tables misaligned. Data pulled from the wrong report. One slide had a placeholder that said, Insert chart here. No chart. Janice was not happy. We had a call with the client the next morning. Elliot tried to talk his way through it. It was bad. The client asked if a junior intern had put the file together. After the call, Janice called me separately and asked, "Did you work on any part of that deck?" I told her I didn't. Not a single piece. She paused. Okay. The next week, Elliot started acting weird. Defensive. He'd hover around Janice's desk more. Drop into random conversations with other teams like he was trying to prove he was involved in something. He started copying me on emails for no reason. I kept my notes updated. Then came the breaking point. In a team-wide strategy meeting, we were asked about recurring issues in workload balancing. Janice said she noticed some projects getting repeated delays and asked for input. Elliot jumped in and said, again, in front of everyone, "Honestly, I think some of us are just getting overloaded. And some people like OP are faster. I think maybe we should just divide work based on capability, not evenly." I turned to look at him. His face was smug. That was it. I stayed late again that night and put everything together in a single PDF. All the files. All the screenshots. All the team's messages. Everything dated, organized, annotated. It was 42 pages. I saved it on a flash drive. The next day, Janice stopped by my desk and said she wanted to do check-ins later that week. I asked if we could meet one-on-one the following day. She agreed. I walked into her office, shut the door, and said, "I have something I think you should see." I handed her the flash drive. She plugged it in and started reading. I watched her face change slowly. From confused, to serious, to quiet. She didn't say much. Just looked up and said, "Can you email this to me as well?" I nodded. That night, I got an email confirming my file was received and would be kept confidential. I didn't hear anything for a few days. Elliot was back to walking around like he ran the place. He even forwarded me a client email with a note saying, "Can you clean this up before I send it?" I didn't reply. That Friday, Janice asked me to step into her office. Elliot was already there. He looked confused to see me. Janice had a folder on her desk. She opened it. Janice didn't say anything right away. She just opened the folder, flipped a couple pages, then looked up at both of us. Her face was calm, but there was something in her eyes. The kind of look you give someone when you already know the truth, and you're just waiting to see if they'll lie to your face. "Elliot," she said, "I wanted to meet because I've been reviewing some project records." He shifted in his chair. "Yeah? Everything good?" "Not exactly," she said. "I've been looking at your file history. Version control. Edit logs. Email threads. I've noticed some inconsistencies." Elliot laughed nervously. "Oh, well, sometimes the system logs things weird, you know? I mean, I collaborate with the team all the time. It's probably just cross-activity." Janice tilted her head, then picked up a printed email chain and slid it across the desk. "This is a thread where you asked OP to handle the entire deck because you had a doctor's appointment. You didn't make a single change to that file. But you presented it as your own the next day to the client." His mouth opened slightly, like he was trying to catch the words before they fell out. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna work on it, but she did it so well, I didn't want to mess it up." Janice stared at him, then turned to me. "OP, you've logged every instance of this kind of handoff?" I nodded. "Every one I could remember. There are likely more." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she opened her drawer, pulled out a second folder, and placed it gently on the desk. It had Elliot's name printed on the label in bold. She tapped it with her finger. "This is your performance evaluation so far. I was planning to go over it next week, but now seems like a good time." Elliot shifted again. "Wait, I didn't know we were doing evals now." She didn't look at him. "You've been here almost a year and a half. That's plenty of time to establish a track record." Then she added, "And some patterns." Before he could speak, she said, "You've been assigned 34 projects in the last 6 months. According to the logs, you initiated 0 of the documents. You only opened about 15% of them, and you've never replied to a client directly." Elliot blinked. Wait, are you saying I'm not working?" Janice leaned back. "I'm saying the data doesn't show that you are." And then, he snapped. He turned to me, loud and sharp. "This is because you're obsessed with getting credit. You could have just asked me to put your name on things. But no, you had to go full teacher's pet and tattle." I didn't even flinch. Janice didn't either. "Elliot, I asked Opie to come in because I noticed these problems on my own. She just confirmed them." He stared back and forth between us like he was looking for an exit. Then he dropped the bomb. Well, if we're being honest, she's the reason things got so delayed. She micromanages everything. She can't let people figure things out. That's toxic. That caught me off guard. Toxic? I opened my mouth, but Janice beat me to it. You're calling someone toxic because they completed your work? He looked cornered. You don't understand. I've had personal stuff going on. And yeah, I let things slide, but it's not like I wasn't trying. Janice paused. What kind of personal stuff? He hesitated. Just stuff. Family things. Mental health. I didn't want to bring it up. Janice raised an eyebrow. We have HR for that. But you never filed anything. You never mentioned a single issue in check-ins. You had time to joke around with coworkers and take half-days for networking lunches. But you didn't have time to communicate? Then she leaned forward. And you're blaming OP, the one person who has been doing twice the work without complaint? Elliot swallowed. This isn't fair. Now, here's where things took a weird turn. Janice closed the folder. Her voice got low. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Both of us stared. She continued. You're not the only employee who's passed off work in this office. I've had 2 other reports this quarter. But this is the first time someone brought receipts this solid. That surprised even me. There are others? I asked. She nodded. Yes. And it's causing fractures. People are burning out. Good employees are quitting or going silent. She looked right at Elliot. You've created more problems than you realize. Elliot leaned back like he was trying to disappear into the chair. Then the twist. Janice stood up and walked over to a file cabinet. She opened it and pulled out another folder. Read this time. It had internal HR review stamped on the front. I've been working with HR to clean this up, she said. This isn't just a warning. We're opening a formal investigation into team conduct, performance misrepresentation, and harassment. Elliot's jaw dropped. Wait, harassment? I never. What harassment? Janice held up a copy of a chat transcript. Telling a junior analyst to stop acting like OP's assistant and to let the alpha dogs run the show counts. Especially when you added a laughing emoji and then dumped 3 hours of work on her. He went pale. HR will be calling you in separately. She added. I'm giving you a chance now to come clean. If you want to submit a written statement, you have 24 hours. Elliot looked like he'd just been hit by a truck. Then he did something I'll never forget. He looked at me, dead serious, and said, You set me up from the start. I just shook my head. No, Elliot. You gave me all the ammo. I just stopped cleaning up after you. Janice ended the meeting right there. We'll be in touch. He walked out without another word. I stayed behind. Janice looked at me, tired but calm. Thank you, she said. I know that wasn't easy. I nodded. I didn't do it for credit. I just couldn't carry him anymore. And then, just as I was about to leave, she said something that stuck with me. Be careful. People like him don't go down quiet. She was right. What came next? I didn't expect it. The next week started off quiet. Too quiet. Elliot didn't show up on Monday, which wasn't surprising. Word had spread that HR was looking into things. Nobody said his name, but people knew. The energy in the office had shifted. People whispered less. Looked over their shoulders more. You could feel the tension in the air. Then Tuesday morning hit, and so did the twist I didn't see coming. Janice was out. Not sick. Not on vacation. Out. Email came from upper management. Janice has decided to pursue other opportunities. Effective immediately. No warning. No goodbye. No explanation. I stared at the screen like it was lying to me. I checked Teams. She was gone. I refreshed. Still gone. Just like that, the one person who knew everything, the one person who had the files, the context, the truth, was erased like a bad draft. And you know who was back? Elliot. He strolled in that same day. Late. Starbucks in hand. Smiling like nothing ever happened. Like the meeting from last week didn't exist. Someone near me muttered. You've got to be kidding. He started making small talk. Loud. Obnoxious. Like he was performing for a crowd. Laughing at his own jokes. Slapping backs. Talking about the chaos of leadership turnover. And how we all needed to band together. I didn't say a word. But I was watching. I checked my folder that night, everything I had on him. I reopened the files I gave Janice. I still had the original flash drive. I still had all my emails, time-stamped, backed up to my personal Google Drive. But if Janice was gone, who else knew? That question got answered on Thursday. I got an email from Tina, a new name from HR, asking to schedule a follow-up regarding a recent workplace concern. I agreed, obviously. She called me into a small glass meeting room around noon. She was polite, friendly, corporate robot-level composed. The kind that could fire you and still smile the whole time. She opened her laptop and said, "Just want to confirm, we're following up on a documentation file submitted by your former supervisor regarding team workload distribution and conduct issues." So Janice did pass it on. I felt a little better. For a second. Then Tina said, "However, we've run into an issue. The attachments included in the submission are no longer accessible. The internal link was deleted when her account was closed." I blinked. "Wait, you don't have the file?" She shook her head. "We have the reference to it in the ticket log. But the documents aren't there anymore. And IT says they can't recover it without a subpoena-level request." I reached into my bag and handed her the flash drive. Tina looked surprised. "You kept a copy?" "Of course I did," I said. She plugged it in. Started scrolling. Her eyebrows lifted as she clicked. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You should know, Elliot has filed a counter-complaint against you." I froze. "Against me?" She nodded. "He claims you created a hostile work environment, targeted him for harassment, and manipulated internal systems to discredit him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He said what?" She pulled up a second file. "His complaint. He said I'd undermined his professional confidence, conspired with management to make him look incompetent, and that I made him feel unsafe with my obsessive documentation." Obsessive? I was floored. I asked, "Did he give proof?" Tina didn't answer directly. "He submitted chat logs and email fragments. We're reviewing everything, but some of the messages appear edited. He screen-capped individual lines out of context." I felt heat rise in my face. He wasn't just lying, he was trying to flip the whole thing. I asked Tina if she had the full chat exports. She didn't. "We only see what's submitted unless we run a formal audit." I leaned forward. "Then run it." "I'll wait." She looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "We'll escalate." The meeting ended. I went back to my desk still stunned. Elliot strolled by a few minutes later, gave me a little smirk, and said, "Rough day?" I didn't answer. But I looked him right in the eyes. And I saw it. He wasn't scared. He was emboldened. Janice being gone gave him room to breathe. The HR file vanishing gave him room to spin his own version. And now he was playing the victim card. I should have seen it coming. Guys like Elliot? They don't go down, they claw their way sideways and hope nobody notices the mess they're making. I started doing my own digging. That night, I talked to a coworker from another team, let's call her Sarah. She used to work under a different manager who also left suddenly. She told me quietly. "I think Elliot had something to do with that too. There were rumors. No one ever said it out loud." I asked her if she ever had problems with him. She hesitated. Then she said, "He made me redo one of his client proposals once. Then later told the director I hijacked the file and took control without asking. I got put on a performance improvement plan for it." She wasn't the first one. I talked to 2 more people. Same pattern. Elliot plays dumb, offloads the work, then twists it around so that if someone pushes back, he calls it bullying. If someone refuses to help, he claims they're sabotaging him. And if someone exposes him, he tries to destroy them before they can finish. I realized something then. This wasn't just about me. This was his pattern. And I wasn't just his problem, I was his latest threat. But this time, I had something none of the others had. Everything. Files. Versions. Edits. Timestamps. Emails. Audio clips. Screen records. People willing to talk. People scared, yes, but people tired of watching him slither through with no consequences. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was about making sure he never did this again. Not here. Not anywhere. And I was just getting started. Elliot kept pretending nothing was happening, but you could see the cracks. HR was reviewing everything. Tina had escalated my evidence for a full internal audit. And after a few late nights and quiet conversations, more people were finally stepping forward. Sarah submitted her own statement. So did a junior analyst, and another guy from finance who said Elliot dumped his work on him during a merger project, then lied about who missed the deadline. The tension in the office was heavy. Conversation stopped when Elliot walked by. People stopped responding to his jokes. He still talked big, like he was above it all, but his voice didn't carry the same weight. The smirk faded a little more each day. Then it happened. All staff meeting, Thursday afternoon. Conference room packed. It was supposed to be a quarterly update from upper management. Normal stuff. Boring slides, mild applause. But halfway through, the head of HR, a no-nonsense woman named Marlene, stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "I'm going to pause the regular agenda," she said, clicking off the projector. "We've had some ongoing investigations regarding professional conduct, ethics violations, and workplace harassment. These matters are not taken lightly." The room went still. Everyone froze. You could hear someone breathing heavy in the back row. Marlene didn't call names at first. She laid it out calmly. They had found repeated patterns of project misrepresentation, falsified contribution claims, and retaliation against coworkers. She mentioned manipulation of internal systems and abuse of collaborative tools. She said specific people had been targeted, their reputations damaged unfairly, and their work stolen. Then she said it. "These incidents involve Mr. Elliot Rollins." Every head turned. Elliot stood at the back, arms crossed, fake confidence glued to his face. "Due to the evidence submitted by multiple staff members and verified through audit, Mr. Rollins' employment is terminated effective immediately." Silence. No anger. No shouting. Just silence. Then Elliot, like a switch had been flipped, threw his arms up and barked. "This is ridiculous. You're believing a bunch of weaklings and overachievers who couldn't handle a little pressure?" Marlene stood still. "Please leave the premises, Mr. Rollins." He laughed, a cold, frantic sound. "Oh come on, Opie set this whole thing up. She's been obsessed with making me look bad since day one." He pointed right at me. "She manipulated everything. She stalked my work. She tracked me like some kind of freak. Who even keeps files on someone like that? Who does that unless they're trying to destroy you?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. But Sarah stood up. "She kept records because you kept dumping your work on her." Then someone else. The quiet analyst. "You told me to send you files with my name off of them." Then another voice from finance. "You said I'd look bad if I didn't let you polish my numbers." Elliot's voice cracked. "This is a setup. This is a mob. You're all letting her get away with." Marlene stepped closer. "That's enough." Elliot stared around the room. No one spoke. No one backed him. Security showed up at the door. Real subtle. Quiet but firm. Elliot's face turned red. Then pale. He picked up his bag and stormed out, muttering the whole way. "You'll regret this. You all will." The doors shut behind him. No one clapped. No one cheered. But people breathed again. That night, the office was weird. Quieter than usual. Sarah came by my desk. Just stood there for a second, then said, "Thank you?" I shrugged. "Didn't feel like I had a choice," she said. "You could have ignored it. That's what most of us did." Others came by too. Not all said anything. Just little nods. A hand on my shoulder. A look that said I saw it too. But not everyone was supportive. Later, as I packed up to leave, another coworker, Brian, one of those middle-of-the-road guys who avoided conflict, pulled me aside. "You could have just gone to Janice earlier," he said. "It didn't have to turn into all this." I looked at him. Tired. Raw. If I'd gone earlier, he would have denied it. Like he always did. And I didn't have proof back then. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't fully get it. Not everyone does. When I got home that night, I sat on my couch and just stared at the wall for a while. It was over. The drama, the waiting, the weight of it. But I didn't feel good. I felt cracked. I didn't realize how much space Elliot had taken up in my head. How often I second-guessed myself. How many hours I spent wondering if I was being petty or paranoid or too much. It wasn't just about work. It was about being made to feel crazy for seeing the truth. I thought of the others, Sarah, the analyst, the finance guy. We'd all been caught in it. And none of us spoke up until it was almost too late. Janice was gone. Forced out? Left on her own? I still don't know. I emailed her after the meeting. She wrote back, "I'm proud of you. That took guts. Don't let this place make you bitter." I don't know if I will or not. The next week, HR rolled out new training sessions. They set up an anonymous reporting line. The company suddenly cared about internal culture. Figures. Elliot's desk sat empty for days. Then someone quietly cleared it out. No fanfare. Just gone. In the weeks after, I kept working. But I was different. Less eager. More careful. A little quieter. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood now. Even when you're right, the cost can still be high. People asked me if I felt like I won. I didn't. I just felt free. And maybe that's enough. For now.